The Duel of Fates is one of the most iconic moments in Star Wars. It wasn't just the climax of the Phantom Menace, it was the moment that defined Obi-Wan Kenobi's life, the return of the Sith to the galaxy, and the birth of a rivalry that would span decades. On Naboo, a single Padawan faced off against a Sith Lord raised since birth to destroy Jedi, and the impossible actually happened. Darth Maul, the apprentice to Sidious, slayer of Jedi Masters, the weapon forged in hatred, was defeated by Obi-Wan Kenobi, who was not even a Jedi Knight. The question has lingered ever since: how did a Padawan defeat a Sith Lord? The truth to this is layered. Obi-Wan did not outmatch Maul in strength, ferocity, or even skill. But through discipline, balance, and Maul's own arrogance, Obi-Wan seized a single moment and changed the course of the galaxy forever. To understand how Obi-Wan triumphed, we must begin with the fall of his master. Qui-Gon Jinn was no ordinary Jedi, a maverick, a seeker of the living force, and a warrior with decades of experience. Qui-Gon entered the duel with Maul confident. His chosen lightsaber form was Ataru, Form 4. The acrobatic style. It was fast, aggressive, reliant on fluid movement, precise, and above all, reliant on stamina. Ataru was designed to overwhelm an enemy with speed and agility, but it did have its weaknesses. Over time, it heavily taxed the user, and against an opponent like Maul who could sustain a relentless tempo, that weakness became a fatal one. Maul recognized it, trained since childhood as a weapon. Maul understood how to break an opponent piece by piece, and in the Theed hangar and through the corridors, Maul fought both Jedi at once. Using his double-bladed lightsaber to control distance and rhythm, he controlled the entirety of the duel. Where Qui-Gon pressed forward, Maul countered with ferocity. Where Obi-Wan darted with his youthful speed, Maul shoved him aside. The battle drove into the power generator complex, and there, Qui-Gon Jinn began to falter. Now separated from his Padawan, Qui-Gon's age, his reliance on bursts of Ataru's energy, this left key openings that Maul exploited. In a dirty trick, one that Darth Maul would later say he regretted using against a Jedi of Qui-Gon's caliber, he struck the Jedi Master in the face with his hilt, then impaled him through the midsection with his lightsaber, finally bringing the Jedi Master down. For Obi-Wan, watching his master fall was more than grief, it was a revelation. Obi-Wan saw the flaws of Ataru laid bare. He saw that offense could not withstand the fury of Maul. The lesson etched into him in blood would one day define the Jedi that he would become. When Qui-Gon Jinn fell, Obi-Wan's composure cracked. A surge of rage and grief overtook him. For most Jedi, this would mean disaster. For Anakin Skywalker, though, the dark side was a fountain of strength. Anger empowered him, made him stronger, faster, more relentless. But Obi-Wan was different from his future Padawan. Obi-Wan's nature was not to seek power, but to seek peace. He was a warrior who didn't like to fight, a pilot who didn't like to fly. He was a contemplative Jedi, one who would rather meditate on the Force than send soldiers to their deaths. For Obi-Wan, the dark side did not empower him, it weakened him. When he gave into his anger, his discipline unraveled. His strikes against Maul became wild, furious, and aggressive. And in that moment, he fought with a strength he had never displayed before. He pressed Maul hard enough to shear the Sith Lord's weapon in half, in fact. But this was not sustainable. The dark side gave him only a fleeting burst. Maul, who thrived in the storm of rage, easily redirected it against him. With a calculated sequence, Maul disarmed Obi-Wan, kicked him into the reactor pit, and left him dangling, humiliated, defeated, and moments from death. This is the truth of Obi-Wan Kenobi. The dark side did not call to him as it did others. It stripped him of balance, clarity, and his real strength. To win, he would need something else entirely. There in the pit, the duel should have ended. Obi-Wan clung to the edge, unarmed, his life seconds from ending. Above him, Maul paced like a predator, savoring this moment, savoring his prey. But why didn't Maul strike the final blow? What made him wait? The answer lies in who Maul really is. Raised by Sidious not to conquer, not to scheme, but to destroy. Maul's entire identity was bound to testing himself against Jedi. Unlike Darth Vader, who would one day slaughter Jedi from across the galaxy out of duty and out of hatred, Maul was leashed. Sidious did not unleash him to purge. He kept him hidden, waiting, restrained. For Maul, every chance to face a Jedi was a rare, precious moment to be savored. And so Maul developed a habit. He gloated, he lingered, he basked in the Jedi's fear. He wanted them to know that they had failed before he struck the final blow. This was more than arrogance. Deep down, Maul hated the Jedi because once as a child, he had hoped that one might come for him, that they would somehow save him from Sidious, but they never did. To Maul, every Jedi was a reminder of abandonment, of hypocrisy, of saviors who never saved him. And so every duel became personal. Every gloat was not just about dominance, it was about vengeance. This is why Maul delayed. He wanted Obi-Wan to suffer, to see the terror in the eyes, to know the Jedi was powerless. Dangling there in the pit, Obi-Wan did not give in to despair. He centered himself. He remembered what he had seen. Qui-Gon Jinn's fall, the exhaustion of Ataru, the way Maul's ferocity shredded aggression. He understood, even in that very moment, that pure offense would never triumph over such an enemy as a Sith. And there, the seed of destiny was planted. Obi-Wan realized the truth. Where Qui-Gon had pressed forward, he would endure. Where Maul fought with fury, he would fight with patience. This moment birthed Obi-Wan's path towards Form 3, Surisu. Surisu emphasized survival, efficiency, and the conservation of energy. It was the form of the Jedi who outlasted, who waited for the enemy to overextend, and who turned arrogance into their downfall. Obi-Wan Kenobi became a master at preying on arrogance, and his teacher here was not Qui-Gon Jinn, it was Maul, the man who would outlast Grievous, who would defeat Anakin Skywalker's fury on Mustafar, who would survive Lord Vader. He was born in this instant of clarity. And then, the final moment arrived. Obi-Wan sensed the opening, the flaw in Maul's arrogance. He summoned the Force, pulling Qui-Gon's lightsaber directly into his hand, and with a surge of clarity, he flipped from the pit in one smooth motion. Maul, caught unprepared, swung too late. Obi-Wan landed, struck, and cleaved the Sith Lord in two. It wasn't strength that won the duel. It wasn't fury or even skill. It was timing, clarity, and discipline. Obi-Wan had balanced himself, seized the moment, and turned Maul's arrogance into his defeat. So why did the Padawan defeat the Sith? Not because Obi-Wan was stronger, not because he was faster, but because he understood balance. Because where the dark side weakened him, the light steadied him. Because where Qui-Gon's aggression faltered, Obi-Wan adapted. And because of Maul's arrogance, rooted in his own tragedy, gave him this opening. This duel was not just Obi-Wan's first victory, it was the crucible that forged him into the Jedi that he would become. The greatest master of Surisu the Jedi Order had ever seen. He became the Jedi that endured, the Jedi who survived the rise and fall of the Galactic Empire. The duel on Naboo was not the end of Darth Maul though either. Cut in half, cast into the abyss, he survived. His body broken, his mind shattered, but hatred keeping him alive. The flame not put out. In that pit, Maul lost not only the battle, but the balance in his own life. The balance that he thought that he believed in. The tragedy of Maul is that he never learned. He never grew beyond the mistake that had undone him here. Time and time again, he fell to the same habits, gloating, prolonging the fight, savoring his enemy's fear rather than finishing them. He clung to rage, unable to let go, unable to forgive the galaxy, the Jedi, or himself. Where Obi-Wan found clarity, Maul only deepened his obsession. To Maul, Kenobi was not just the man who defeated him on Naboo, he was the thief of destiny. Obi-Wan became the symbol of everything Maul had lost. His victory, his place at Sidious's side, even his purpose. And so, Maul spent his life trying to undo that singular moment, never realizing that it was his own arrogance, not Obi-Wan's strength, that sealed his fate. He could never see the shortcomings of his master Sidious, nor the prison of the Sith path that he had chosen. He could never free himself from the need to dominate and to prove, and so he resigned himself to a life in service of the dark, forever repeating his same downfall. When he finally faced Obi-Wan on Tatooine decades later, nothing changed. Maul struck with fury, Obi-Wan countered with patience, and once again balance overcame arrogance. In the end, Maul died as he had lived, consumed by the same mistake that defined him on Naboo, that downfall. And that is the final truth of the Duel of Fates. It did not only forge Obi-Wan into the Jedi of balance, it revealed the flaw in Darth Maul that would haunt him forever. One man learned and endured, the other would never let go. We need to be clear though, when Obi-Wan struck down Maul on Naboo, it was not a triumph of sheer martial superiority. Obi-Wan did not overwhelm Maul through superior technique, speed, or power. Instead, he capitalized on a fleeting moment of arrogance, a flaw that haunted Maul his entire life. Obi-Wan's victory came not from being the greater warrior, but from being more centered in that single instant. Hanging on the edge of the reactor shaft, he found clarity where Maul lost his discipline. It's important to emphasize that at this point in time, Obi-Wan was not a greater duelist than his master Qui-Gon. In fact, Maul himself noted after their clash on Tatooine that Qui-Gon Jinn was the finest duelist that he had ever encountered. What impressed Maul so much was not simply Qui-Gon's blade work, but his composure, his ability to remain steady even under the punishing heat and shifting sands of Tatooine. Maul had expected to exploit that environment, only to find Qui-Gon unmoved by it. For all his relentless training, Maul respected Qui-Gon's poise in battle, a recognition that makes it clear who truly stood above Obi-Wan at the time. The duel on Naboo was not defined by Maul's lack of skill. His technique was flawless, his movements as fluid and precise as any Sith assassin could have hoped to achieve. What undermined him was his arrogance, his tendency to prolong the fight and to savor domination rather than end it with finality, unlike Dooku, whose precision allowed him to close engagements with merciless efficiency, or Vader, whose crushing ferocity left little room for survival. All toyed with his prey. In doing so, he denied himself the very victories his training demanded. Obi-Wan did not outclass him in form or ferocity, but in that one heartbeat where discipline met overconfidence, and Obi-Wan seized the moment. But anyway, my friends, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on the climactic duel in The Phantom Menace, the Duel of Fates? What are your thoughts on this defining moment for Obi-Wan Kenobi, his decision to switch over to Form 3 Surisu, and how many seem to misinterpret the duel as Darth Maul simply being outclassed, rather than the reality of the engagement? Anyway, my friends and fellow lore junkies, thank you so much for visiting the archives here today, and as always, may the Force be with you.